Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers like Pepsi and Instacart build retail media and product detail page content faster than ever before at itsrapid.ai. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Shelf. To understand e-commerce, I always say, you have to understand commerce. You have to understand the customer, the consumer, who they are, what they're looking for, and how quickly they want to get it. With that, I think it's fair to say that no one understands these concepts better than my guest today. Having begun his career in customer solutions for J&J and Colgate-Palmolive some 20 years ago, he understands that maximizing your business, whether online or in store, means understanding your customer. He is a leading voice in the world of e-commerce and digital research, an insightful strategist, and a hockey coach as well. We'll get into that later. Please welcome my guest today, Sam Gagliardi. Sam, welcome to the show.
David, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, let's get right to it. You've started out your career with companies like Colgate-Palmolive and J&J, amazingly well-known brands, building out strategies for them to succeed in physical retail, brick and mortar. What was the thought on e-commerce all those years ago? Was it even a thought when you were getting started in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. What I always did early on in my career was really try to put the shopper or the consumer first and foremost, make sure I was focusing on that shopper. And when I did a lot of work, especially early on, I did a lot of work within quote unquote sales or category management. So working specifically with the retailer. And when you work with the retailer, if you present everything or you approach everything in the context of that shopper or of that consumer, that's where you're likely to make an impact. So, in the 2009, 2010 timeframe, yes, for a lot of folks, it's a career ago for a lot of folks. I started seeing the opportunity of offering superior convenience to shoppers via the online space. And because of that convenience, because of that time-saving apparatus, because of what became a cost-saving component of it, I knew that if I was able to, switch from the in-store to the online, operate in the omni-channel, but really make sure that I continue to focus on the shopper and meeting what she needed, her needs and her wants, that I would be able to continue to build my career. And that's why I made the switch.
I love it. Did it feel like a risk at the time, or how did it feel when you made that move?
Absolutely. It felt like a risk. This whole internet thing is not going to work, right? That's what we always heard back then.
Right.
It is so foolish to want to ship books, online is what we heard. Right. And so it certainly was a risk, but at the same time, I've always found myself, really approaching those types of risk. And what I also found too, which is unique, and because I used to, I build teams, and when I build teams, I always look for this. What I also realized was that by going in this direction, there was an immense amount of ambiguity in terms of what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why we're going to do it. How does everything we know, how do we then take it from the in-store to the online? It is the same consumer at the end of the day. And that ambiguity is really what got me excited. When I build teams, especially teams that will be focusing on the digital space, I specifically look for folks who can deal with ambiguity, who can manage ambiguity, which is the HR trait, as they like to try to hire for. Because what I found is that some folks just can't deal with it, right? From the in-store world, if you want growth, you get one more display. If you want growth, you get one more facing. If you want growth, you get one more item onto the shelf, right? It's really easy to think of it in those incremental type phases, incremental type approaches. When it comes online, it is, a blue ocean in terms of how you're going to grow, where you're going to grow, so forth and so on. And that's, managing the ambiguity allows you to create the future. And that's what I always really appreciated.
So I'm coming in for an interview with you. I want to be on the team. What's the question you're going to ask me to see how I do with ambiguity?
There are always situational questions, right? We all know this in terms of how we hire, and you ask folks to talk about an experience that they've had
Yeah.
where they're set up with, they're presented a problem. They had no way to be able to understand they had no idea on how they want to approach the problem. And then you try to understand what they did to think it through, right? Was it, at first were they paralyzed with fear and indecision, right? It's easy to say, okay, this person doesn't really deal with ambiguity. Or did they get excited with it and they start asking questions? Did their curiosity really bubble up? And can you see the curiosity? In addition to that, you really try to pressure test what it is they did by understanding the details and going down, drilling down. Because if someone loves this, if someone did this and it became who they are, they can tell you every single detail of everything they did. Even if, even within my career, I can tell you things that we did back in 2009, 2010, 2011 that I'm incredibly proud of, and give you the detail in the moment, the smell in the room, right? What I was wearing maybe, or something like that. It just becomes part of who you are in that setting.
You went from these amazing brands to another amazing brand, Barilla, which is famous for producing all types of pastas, as we know. Tell us a little about that. You created, speaking of teams, the Barilla America Shopper Marketing Team. What was that like?
Yeah, what I wanted to do was stretch my legs, coming from big blue chip Fortune 500 CPG firms to a smaller type startup type organization. With that said, it was a startup, but it had a 200-year-old brand name in that context. In addition to that, it was my first venue in terms of really working with a global organization that was foreign owned, which was also a very unique experience. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to move from personal care over to the food manufacturing. It was a lot of fun to really, truly try to understand working from a very large portfolio to a much more narrow portfolio. But it was also a lot of fun to be able to, work with, in essence, your ownership in another country, and to really be able to educate them and help them understand what is needed to be successful in the U.S. going forward. I had a lot of fun working with them. The trips to Italy were certainly a perk that I appreciated and loved.
Don't want to pass on.
Yeah, and some of your listeners might work in food companies, but having an executive Italian chef on staff in the facility,
wow,
was also a nice perk as well.
Note to self. So I like that one. Now, food and grocery is one of these categories where there is this big in-store component and physical component, and then there's the online and the digital. And how did you kind of navigate that in the time there at Barilla?
Yeah, it's, what I would tell you is that what I started there actually came full light when I worked at Reckitt. So if I could just actually move you to Reckitt, which is where I went next. And what I mean by that is that I left Barilla because I needed a bigger opportunity. So I didn't go quite full bright to the big Fortune 500 blue chip CPGs. I went with Reckitt and Keyser, and now I think they're called RB or Reckitt. Excuse me, they're called Reckitt now. But incredibly hungry, incredibly aggressive. Coming from, I like to say, my time at Colgate-Palmolive, I was working for a true global organization. Someone like a Johnson & Johnson, they were actually more of an international organization, in my opinion, meaning they had business everywhere, but their mindset was truly American first.
Oh, I see.
Barilla was European first, trying to do well in America. Then going back to Reckitt was in the same light as Colgate-Palmolive, a true global organization. And what I mean by that, or why I appreciated that, was that the flow of ideas, no matter where they came from, it was always much easier to get the good idea faster, right? So the global organizations, if an idea came from France, they'll bring it to the US and they'll incorporate it as soon as possible. There's no issues. Versus other firms, there's other types of issues. But going back to your question, you need to remember back in 2011, household penetration online was like 1 or 2%, right? Now the luck I had is that I worked for Reckitt, where the headquarters and a lot of the managers were coming from the UK, where household penetration was close to 17%. So they believed in it. They were believers in terms of e-commerce. They were just looking for folks to go and figure it out. And I was one of those folks, luckily for me. But the question you have, which is, okay, well, how do you go from a low penetration, brand to a higher penetration? How does it operate? Well, what we did at Reckitt, specifically with Lysol, we made Lysol one of the top 5 categories, or the cleaning product, one of the top 5 categories in all of Amazon. And we did that because we developed a very specific strategy that did several things. First and foremost, we understood the power of having incredible product detail pages. We invested in our product detail pages, and the saying I would always have for my brand partners was that your product, these product detail pages need to be as good as your brand.com websites. More people will actually come and look at your Lysol wipes product page, and then we'll go to Lysol.com. Right? Lysol.com is an iconic, incredible, huge brand. Everyone knows it, but that's exactly why they don't go to their Lysol.com website, because they know it, right? There's no reason to go to it. Versus if you're in the shopping mode, you go to your shopping, your online shopping store, Amazon or Walmart or Target, whatever it might be. And then if you're looking for the brand, you go there and you find it, meaning that we had always had more eyes on the brand on the retail pages than we do on the brand.com sites. So you can't neglect it. It has to be better, if not the same, if not better. It was a strategy we called build, where we would build our presence on these retail pages that we better than anyone else in the marketplace. Then what we did is that we drove. Now, in the very early beginning, this was before retail media. So what we did is that we used our own digital media to shorten the path to purchase and to take shoppers who are just seeing an advertisement and giving them an opportunity with call to action with the buy now button. Buy now, and back then this is subscribe and save would save 15%. But go and save 15% right now with subscribe and save. So that would shorten the path to purchase. It would also help us win in terms of the search algorithm on Amazon too, because all this traffic was coming to our product detail page that was already where it needed to be. And all that, not a vast majority, but a component of that traffic was converting and buying. So it allowed us to earn our rank. And then finally, you earn. And it created a model or a framework that we like to use internally called build, drive, and earn. And the earning is obviously the sales. The earning is obviously the search rank. The earning is obviously the prestige that you would have with the retailer to be able to try and do different and unique things with them in that vein. But my point here was that there was no reason for shoppers all of a sudden to make Lysol wipes a top 5 category within the entire in terms of all the categories that are shopping on Amazon right now. There was no reason to do that. The team at Reckitt actually created it with this framework, with using the traffic to drive the traffic to the brand pages, and to be able to earn that shoppers. And it gave us an incredible advantage. It gave us a first mover advantage, first and foremost, working with Amazon. But then additionally, what it did allowed us to be able to test and learn, and then to reapply across the other 18 to 20 different brands that we worked with.
Amazing. This idea that you do have to bring your own traffic and customers and consumers to the page, and that page needs to be, like you said, even better than the brand page, the homepage, what have you. Those are just such great insights. And I think still true today, where you have to do that work, but maybe you're applying some different tactics now to get that done.
You're exactly right. But this is the thing too. Like it was always like that, With the introduction, what's not on my resume is where I started off early on. I worked at Ralston Purina, right out of school, right out of university. And I actually learned how to do category management with them, which is great because they, by far, up until, 10, 15 years in my experience in the industry, they were still the best ones at it that I've ever seen, to be honest with you, the folks that I worked there. But my point here is that we would work with retailers and help them understand that if they didn't have puppy chow, the consumer was leaving the store. They didn't have dog chow, the consumer was leaving the store. If they didn't have Purina One, the consumer was going to leave the store. And by the way, which consumers were those? You're right. What was who was the base of that core consumer that was coming in, and how important it was to the overall financial viability of that retailer or that specific store, and then of that retailer. And again, that category management principle, which is that everything I'm going to do is not going to lift up my brand, but it'll lift up the entire category. Is the way that I've always tried to operate here. And it was the same thing, right? Going from the in-store to the online, this is the dumb luck I had. It just always made sense to me when I'm online. And it just made sense because I was able to apply those core learnings that we had in the in-store world about, focusing on the shopper, the consumer, making sure that you're understanding who she is and what needs and wants that she has. What can you do to really, improve her shopping experience, and then working to build that basket so that the retailer is getting full value out of everything that you're doing with your brand and for your category.
Sam, we could write a whole book together on this topic. I want to ask you about content and media, though. So we do now have these kind of different tactics, different ways of reaching the consumer. Will you unpack that a little bit for us? What's working? We hear about commerce media, we hear about commerce, e-commerce, omni. How does all that come together, and how do you kind of frame it up in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say too, and this is, learnings that we had back at Reckitt back in 2012, 2013, which, it's over a decade ago. So it's a little laughable that it's still new for all of us. But at the same time, it hasn't changed. What we always discussed back then, and what I believe still today, it's not e-commerce, it's not in-store, it's not omnichannel, it's just all commerce, right? It's really fixating and focusing on the need of the shopper and the wants that the shopper has at the time. When it comes to media, this is where we have migrated a little bit. And I always had a graph that I would share with a lot of my clients when I was at Circana. And the graph was to really help brands understand the differences that they need to the difference that they have to understand in terms of launching a new item in the in-store world only versus launching on the online store only. And what I mean by that is that in the in-store world, many brands have the advantage of being able to, and this is certainly true a couple of years ago, but still true now, load up the different retailers with excessive amounts of inventory on the very beginning. When I used to say, when I was at Colgate and I was managing the personal care brands for Colgate at Target, we would roll in there and we would tell our buyer, like, listen, here is a or a B or a C level launch, and whether it would define on how large of rev or sales you would grow over the course of a year. That would define that. You would, work with them to help them get to first to market, because what many of those retailers understand is that wherever someone is introduced to a brand and they buy it for the first time, they're more likely to go back there than to go anywhere else. So you always want to be first. And this is always a big deal for Target and Walmart because they always wanted to be first in that context. But the benefit you would get, that a marketer would get, was that they were shipping up to 3 months worth of inventory into a store. And that inventory for any size, for a $30 million launch could be up to 10, 20, $30 million worth of inventory that's going in. That was profit already that they would take. And then they would wait up to 90 days, because it usually takes about 90 days for you to have, to reach a specific threshold in the US where most stores has your item. Then you would turn your media on. Nowadays, what we help a lot of brands understand, which is like, no, you actually need to invest before you have that inventory build, because as you're discussing right now, you need to be able at a lower level connect the right shoppers with your products to be able to gain those sales as soon as possible. And that's the uneasiness that many marketers have right now, because do they really truly believe in what they're launching, right? Because if you really believe in it, you'll have no problem with
You should make the investment.
Forward investing, right? As opposed to waiting till you get
the proof,
10, 20, $30 million of inventory sold out the door, and then you turn your media on. And that's really is the big difference. So when it comes online, going back to your question, when it comes to is this retail media, commerce, e-commerce, omnichannel, it's commerce. But what you really truly need to understand right now, and this is where I think you're going with your question here too, is that you have to be able to go out and truly understand which audience that is going to connect with your item, and then double down with that audience, because everything is done at a much lower micro level now than it's ever been before. What I used to tell my clients all the time, is that my biggest learning when I came from the in-store to the online world, and you can see it in terms of the in-store assortment. You walk down, and let's just pick on Coke and Pepsi right now, because it's so easy to see this. When you walk down the soda aisle right now, there is just a sea of red or just enormous brand blocks of Coke and then of Pepsi, so forth and so on. And there's so many variants, so many different sizes in terms of all the folks that are in terms of all the offerings that are out there. We had the same thing in terms of Reckitt, in terms of all the different flavors of Lysol wipes, so forth and so on. But when an item was incredibly successful, what we discovered was that 95% plus of the sales driven would be driven off of a single specific item.
That one item.
One SKU. Not all the variants in that context. So what I always tell my clients is like when you go in store, right, your sales are a mile wide. Right. They're all spread off all over the variants. And a lot of that is also how shoppers are shopping and inventory management and everything else. Right. It's just shoppers just grabbing the red box in the Coke's case. When you go online, no, they want the lemon scented Lysol wipe, and that's all they want. Right. So that they just go and they buy it. And in addition to that, what we also understand, and what I always tell my clients as well, too, is that the data that we were seeing at Circana was that shoppers were appearing to be more loyal online than they were in store. Now, I use the word appearing, right? Because what a lot of folks told me is like, no, they are more loyal. And I said, no, they appear to be more loyal. And I say that because we also have the intelligence. And the intelligence is that shoppers are migrating from reshopping online to just rebuying online. And when you go back to buy what you previously purchased, or subscribe and save, or, if you're using, reshopping the list that you bought previously here, right? Whatever that initial brand is that is bought, right? Whatever that initial brand is that was purchased, they just repurchase it, right? They're not shopping it again. They're just rebuying it again.
And just to make it clear, the shopping part is I'm discovery. I'm looking, I'm thinking about what might go in my basket. The rebuy is I've committed to the brand, and now I'm kind of coming back over and over to make that purchase. I might even be on auto because I'm on subscribe and save. To
exactly.
Your point,
the brand met your needs the last time you used it.
Yeah,
the value was good enough for you to continue to buy it. Why reshop it? Why explore what else is out there? At the end of the day, I want to sanitize my counter. That's it. That's all I'm going to do in that vein. So there's no reason to reshop it. And it's just hyper, how would I position it? I would say it's, step back. Why do shoppers buy online? Ease, right? They buy online because it's easy. They buy online because it's more efficient use of their time. They receive it, they get it delivered, or they pick it up. It's all about, how it saves them in time. So in the same vein, why continue to shop for something that is meeting your needs? Just rebuy going forward. Now, again, the exception is obviously, deals and promotions and coupons and this and that, everything else. If people are trying to, stretch their dollars, that changes a consumer's mindset. But on the initial set, for a consumer that's not looking to do that, they're just trying to get done with something as soon as possible.
I love it. Sam, tell us about Circana. You made the switch from the brand side to SaaS and analytics and insights and that part of the world. Tell us a little about the move first, and then about some of the work.
Yeah, the move was a lot of fun. I was at Reckitt. The gentleman who hired me, Bob Tomei at IRI, he was actually presenting at a Reckitt national sales meeting. He presented just before I did. And he stayed and he watched my presentation. And soon afterwards, he approached me and said, hey, I could help you get the entire CPG as an audience for your next meeting, as opposed to just a single organization. And at that time, I was looking for a bigger opportunity. And at the time, I was also realizing, it's not too untrue right now, too, that e-commerce was still more lip service from a lot of executives. Everyone talked about how important it is. Everyone made it a top 5 priority or a top 3 priority. But a lot of firms, it was all lip service. And what I saw the opportunity was for me to go from working at a single organization, doing some really cool things with some really great people. And I really appreciated to being able to do that across, 200 clients in that vein, and to really have an incredible impact. And that's specifically why I did that. In addition to that, I believed in the Circana technology. that they're going forward with. And I really, truly believe that my practitioner capabilities that I had allowed me to better understand what they needed to develop for the right for the consumer, for the clients rather, excuse me, for them to be able to continue to drive their business going forward. And so it was a aligning of the stars in that sense, and I really enjoyed it. I actually just left Circana after 9.5 years. Again another time for me to stretch my legs and to try some different things right now. But my time at Circana was really, really incredible. I enjoyed it, and I met a lot of friends across the industry doing it.
Sam, I want to talk about what's next, but first, I've got a couple of fun stats. We did a little homework before the show to read you from some research we did with Circana. First off, 80% of meals were made at home in 2022. Gamers age 45 and over outnumber gamers age 2 to 24 in the US, and they're the fastest growing of any game segment. 80% of dollars in apparel, gained in apparel, came from those with a household income of 150K or more, and 82% of restaurant visits made in the US in 2022 were to quick serve restaurants. So I highlight these because I want to ask you this very simple question, which is, why does this information matter, and what should a brand be doing with it when they're thinking about their go-to-market strategy?
So it matters to the right brand, to be completely transparent and honest with you. What I would do is adjust it just a little bit, and your data was incredibly useful. But I would actually bring it back to the CPG world a little bit, because I'm not sure if all that is something that the CPG folks really
would
need.
Use.
But what it does do, it does highlight is Circana's capabilities, incredible capabilities to really help you understand who the consumers are, what the consumers are into, so that you can then better be able to find a way to connect with those consumers. Now, the other part of Circana's business is not only being able to understand the consumers and to create the audiences of those consumers and to identify the households of those consumers, so that you can deploy media to those households, but also to understand the scoreboard and how you're performing. And that was actually my sweet spot back with my business back in the day too, where when it came to e-commerce, a lot of my brands would come to me and said, "Hey, listen, we grew 30% last year. My management wants to know if that's good though." Right. And that's where being able to have market information in terms of, this is what you grew, but this is what the market grew, and this is your share, right, allowed the C-suite to have meaningful conversations with the analysts on Wall Street in terms of how are you really truly performing. And when a firm really did well, everyone heard about it in that vein. The opportunity we had was that for the big blue chip firms, what we constantly kept seeing was that their business online was not as large and as dominant as it was in the in-store world for some reasons that we can go on in another session.
I'll have you back.
Yeah, but that's where, so you didn't hear a whole lot about it, but this is where it's incredibly important to truly understand how you're performing versus your competitors in that context.
So interesting. Now, I want to ask you one other piece from your Circana and your brand experience, which is you got to work with a lot of technology companies, some like It's Rapid that I work at and founded. How did you navigate kind of bringing in new capabilities, whether they're tech or services or just new ways to work when you're on the brand side? And how do you think about that as on the SaaS side, software as a service, at a company like Circana?
Yeah, I mean, when you're on a brand side, it's all about hunger. It's like, okay, we need to hit a very specific, be able to meet a specific question. And some of the questions might be, well, I need to be able to show share so that my management understands that we're winning. Or I need to be able to drive growth so that my management understands that we're winning. And that's where you're always out there. What we did really well when I was at Reckitt was that we were always taking meetings with everyone, bringing folks in and trying to listen to truly understand what they were doing, and then bring it back internally. And not only to say, okay, do we need this now, but also what do we need for the next thing? What's the future? What's new? What's next in that vein? And that's where, yeah, David, you and I also worked in your previous life together too. And, our track record, that I had at Reckitt was that we were usually one of the first 3 vendors with all the great technology that's still out there right now And that was because we were hungry. We were out there. We were trying different things. We created an environment where my team had the flexibility to try something new and to fail fast. And that's where it comes from with on the brand side. Now, on the other side, and this is where I love the fact that I was able to do both. What I would ask for some of our, for partners that are looking to be able to do things, some of the best ideas of what needs to be next comes from the brands. And not all the ideas, and this is the problem we had at Reckitt sometimes too, that we were so far ahead of everyone else that we would go and bring an idea, but the idea at that point isn't quite scalable for a SaaS or a DaaS organization to be able to take it mainstream. So what you have to do is position yourself for some of these firms to be an incubator of innovation, right? Where you're bringing an idea, you're creating an environment where they have low risk of failing, for them to be able to come in, to be able to marshal the right resources, to be able to do something on a low revenue opportunity. They're not going to get rich off of what they're going to do with you, but what they will get is skills and know-how to really be able to build the future at a future date. And I'm going to be very clear, because no great idea really blows up everywhere at the same time. For heaven's sakes, I had the idea back in 2015 when I went to Circana to combine digital shelf data with point of sale data online.
Hey, wait a second. That sounds like a good idea.
You think? But it took us until a couple of years ago to be able to do it, because there wasn't the scalable demand that was out there. And sometimes when you do things the right way, the resources that it require are immense. So a lot of these SaaS organizations can't always say, well, I'm going to go drive $50 million of revenue here.
Right.
Because if you're honest and you forecast the revenue on a per client basis, you go out there, and there's some clients, I won't list anyone, but there's some clients that they're going to want this.
Yeah.
There might be some clients that say, I want this. There's some other clients that you say they'll likely want this. But then there's a whole other list of clients that, and David, you and I spoke about this before, that would rather not be wrong than to be right. And because of that, it slows down the entire industry in terms of where we need to go for these firms that are developing, because they can't develop at scale, right? And that's something we experience at Circana quite often, which is we get a great idea. We have an incredible partner. And then we would go forward with this, but maybe it didn't always work out as well as possible, because we were never able to marshal those full resources for a $50 million opportunity, because it wasn't truly a $50 million opportunity at that time. And this is where, as more of the industry focuses more on the narrow term, on the short returns, it actually impedes innovation. So what I would suggest, being this person that's experienced both, this is where, for the brands, find those partners that are technological leaders in terms of what they're doing, sell them on the future, and then realistically work with them to understand what they can do, when they can do it, and how they can do it to meet the needs there, and understand it probably won't be 100% what you want it to be, but it's still an opportunity for you to gain an advantage. And then for the firms that are servicing these clients, this is where you have to be a good partner. And being a good partner starts with being truthful and saying, hey, listen, I agree with you. I want to do this, but this is as much as I can do.
This is where we are.
As far as I can do, as soon as I can do. And this is what we're likely going to do. So we're not going to be able to get the bright, but this is where I think we can be optimistic, or we can work together to really try to find this. And then the whole point being here is that success breeds success, right? So if it is that good of an idea, and it is, you do execute it as well as you can, then you take it to the market and you share it. And then everyone else will want it. And then you have those scaled resources to be able to drive that innovation going forward. It's complicated. Everybody only wants what they want when they want it. But now, since I've had the ability to be on both sides of it here, I truly understand on the brand sides how you desperately believe that you need something, and it should be so easy for someone to do it. And on the service provider side, what it really takes, right? We all know strategy is determining what it is that you don't do as much as what you choose to do in that vein. And that's where this becomes really complicated in terms of how are we going to support that going forward. But there is definitely a way forward. There is an opportunity to be able to gain and to drive that innovation going forward. But it takes true partnership, full transparency, and folks leaning in.
Sam, what a great gift to have been able to hear you talk about the brand side, the service provider side, put those two together. Tell us about the next few years, AI, retail media, automation, all these great topics. What are you seeing, and what role is it going to play? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, I what I'm doing right now is working to definitely stay on this client service side, working with different types of platforms to really meet the needs of the brands by really first and foremost delivering them the consumers that they want to be able to drive sales, be able to drive performance, be able to drive share. I can't speak a whole lot more into it as of right now, but that's where I'm positioning myself to be able to continue to drive that going forward. And I can't be more excited. And the reason why I can't be more excited is that, as we all know, this part of the business, the e-commerce business, will become a larger part of the overall. I truly believe that we are still in the early phases of everything. So it's that much more important for all of these brand leaders, all these category leaders, to win disproportionately now. Because if they don't win now, the future is not as robust as it was previously. And I want to help all my clients to be able to create the future for their brands going forward.
Sam, I want to wrap up with where I started out, which is hockey, and your time as a hockey fan and a hockey coach. Will you tell us about that? Any favorite teams, and how's it play a part in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Buffalo, New York. So for the rest of the country, a lot of people consider it Canada. I'm actually going to the Bills game this weekend. So go Bills. I can't wait to be sitting there in 8-degree weather. But I did all of it. I was a Sabres fan growing up, so a long-suffering Sabres fan. It's been 13 plus years, I think, since they made the playoffs. But my passion for coaching and such really came from, working with my son, who is a college club hockey player right now for Lehigh University. And early on working with him and being that guy that drove him at, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, beating the sun up in the winter, and just allowing him to really, pursue his passion. Like I said, he's pursuing it into college and he's loving it. So it's been a part of our life for that many years. And it's not unlike what we do here in business. You have to have the core fundamental talent of being able to skate and to stop and to turn and to pass and everything else, the core fundamentals. But at the end of the day, what I've always thought I brought to my business was a blue collar, hard work mentality. And hockey is the one of the most blue collar sports that I've ever appreciated watching, which is you can see when a team is working really hard, and that hard work really does eclipse talent, and it creates opportunities for folks to be able to find success. And I think the same thing is true here in the professional world as well.
Sam, what a pleasure having you on the show today. So many great topics, truly inspiring. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to chat with me today on Beyond the Shelf.
Thank you so much, David. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.